Last week, I spent 3 days in Vegas at Caesars Forum. I was the A1 for one of the biggest corporate shows of my career to date. It was a world-class crew produced by Vodfeed Production and supported by Streamline Technical Group. And again, I was just the A1. And usually that means anything audio if it's a smaller show. But on a bigger show like this, we subdivided the department's responsibilities. We had a dedicated comm tech, an A2 who handled RF. We had a records tech for both video and audio, and a system engineer he did the design, he did the tuning. His name was Jeremy, so shout out to him for doing a great job. And then I was the A1. I was responsible for making it both sound good in the room and also for the live stream. So I had a PM5 in front of me. I had a full Waves SoundGrid server. So again, a lot of great tools. But one thing I did not have to worry about is the system. And it's something that came to mind after the show. I was walking back behind the drape about to tear down some gear with my A2 Nick, and he said, "Hey, was it nervous that you had to walk into this gig having no control over the system and really no say? It wasn't your design, not your gear, and that's something you specialize in." And I thought about it, and it really didn't occur to me, because what had happened is something that a mentor and colleague of mine has termed the flip. If you are on kind of two sides of the table, responsible for mixing the show and responsible for designing and tuning the rig that supports the show, you're doing the same job. You want to make sure it sounds great for everyone, but there's two different ways and facets of approaching that goal. So it was a really cool reminder to me that we could spend all of this time and energy on the system, and we should, and it's important. But at the end of the day, it's so that we can hand off this tool for someone else to be able to accomplish their goal of mixing the show. And it's, we should make sure it sound good in every single seat. So today I want to unpack that flip in the mindset, because it really was helpful for me to think about it and like, oh wow, I wasn't really even thinking about that, because Jeremy, my system tech, did such a great job. So let's dive in. I got 3 main points I want to cover to see how that plays out within live audio when you do experience that flip. The biggest and most obvious pro is I was able to give my full attention to the mix, to my audio playback cues, and the live stream audience. So even though I was just A1, there's still a whole lot of other destinations besides the PA. There's the full back monitor for the talent so they can hear walk-ons and playback on stage. There's a lobby speaker that's driven off the matrix from the console that's not in the system processor. There's the program monitors that are everyone's desks behind the drape so they can hear program. I'm mixing that for them. So I still need to worry about where else my mix is going, just beyond handing it off to a processor. There's also mix minuses for remote presenters over Zoom. So there's still quite a bit of coordination. But it was cool to know that I just need to focus on that and not whether it sounds good in the bleachers in the back, because that was actually my only tweak on the PAs. After playing a reference track and walking the system, I had Jeremy turn up the outer delays for the bleachers up a couple of dB. And again, I wish I could show you more pictures of the show, but because NDAs and such, I cannot. But I can tell you about it in somewhat vague detail. So Jeremy was very open to feedback, and he said, "Hey, this is ultimately your show, and I have tuned it and aligned it to where I think it sounds good, but any suggestions you have or want to make, I'll happily make them." And that was the only thing I had to do. He did a great job. So what it reminded me of is that when I'm in charge of a system for a client, whether I'm doing it for a venue and handing it off to their church, or a piano bar so they can have a great show, it's ultimately their system. It's their canvas to paint on. So I might have certain ways I want to tune it or have the tonality of the system, but their art is coming through our lens. So that was a good reminder. We ultimately have to hand all of this off. It also reminded me how much production is a team sport. Like I mentioned, we'd had an A1, was me, an A2 handling RF and pinning laws and putting RF all over the place. The stage managers also had handhelds in their back pockets as backup. We had a dedicated comm tech, who was a killer Riedel system. We had a system tech, Jeremy, who was responsible for the D&B rig. It was a bunch of, if you are just dying to know, it was some XSL hangs as well as some T10s. And the subs, I believe, were KSL 15s. fact check me if I don't got that there. And then we also had a dedicated records tech for both video and audio, since our feeds from the general recession were being piped out to a live audience, and then also to have recorded for archival purposes and sizzle reels and all that. So records had to really sound good. Also, from a team perspective, the PA design had to account for where rigging was available and be out of sight lines. So they had to work with the lighting and video department to make sure they had enough trim height to be out of, this big cool logo or moment in the show. And if there was a PA hanging down and blocking it, that's no good. So I love that about production, that it is a team sport, and the bigger the show gets, the more complexity. We need dedicated experts to make sure each individual thing was getting done. Because I couldn't imagine trying to pull the show off if I was A1 and A2, or A1 and system tech, having to worry about all of this at once. It's doable, but I think it would be a lot of unnecessary stress. So besides that luxury of being able to give my full attention to just making the mix happen, and I had a PM5, which was a lot of fun to mix on. It was my first time. Secondly, I didn't care about the PA as much as I thought I would. And this is weird coming from someone who runs a YouTube channel for part of my living that teaches about sound system design. But since I had flipped into mix engineer mode, it simply became a tool to help transmit what I was doing. And it was doing it well from the get-go, so it immediately got out of the way. I wasn't thinking about it. And so I think that's technology at its best, that you enjoy using it because you're getting good results and it's getting so much out of the way so I could simply do my thing. Of course, I had to get used to how that particular room sounded and where my mix position was in relationship to a box and make sure that was working right. But since the system was deployed right, I wasn't worried about it. And so even in the middle of these breaks and stuff, my brain was on how can I get better results out of the PM5, get more used to its workflow, maybe try moving something around in the insert chain to make sure my lavs were balanced more. That's where my headspace was at on the particular craft of mixing the system, mixing the show, not running the system. And again, knowing that someone was very competent, was taking care of it, took that off my plate. I wasn't worried whether or not it was going to sound good in the bleachers. I knew that if it sounded good right here in mix position, it was going to sound good right there. So it further gave me more pride and honor in the fact that what we get to do as system engineers, it builds that much trust with front of house engineers if we're able to do that. So by myself being taken care of in that manner, it was like, cool, I really like doing that for other people as well. But I may think people should be gushing about the tonality was so even, and it was, or the sub sounded so tight, even in this big boomy room, and they were, but I was just happy that my mix was sounding good on the system. And that's a compliment, I think an even higher compliment than just gushing about the system. Because the system is only a system. It has to be used to get something else done, and that was making sure the show sounded good. I had plenty of gain before feedback, and some other tools on the console help with that for sure, but it starts with the design, because if there's overlap between the audio from the design itself and the stage, you get feedback. So kudos to a good design and good deployment. And lastly, it reminded me that I still love mixing shows. With system design and tuning, you are assembling and tuning up the car. And when you're mixing, you're getting to drive the car. So it reminded me that even though I still do mix fairly regularly, mixing on this scale of show, with this great of a crew and great of equipment, was like, oh yeah, this is really fun, and I do enjoy it. Because I've had the thought of like, should I really double down and specialize in this and not do a whole lot of shows? But it was a good reminder that no, I really do enjoy this. I never want to get out of the driver's seat, if you will. So I want to stay there. And again, it gave me perspective I would otherwise not have when I am doing engineering or system engineering. There are a few system engineers out there who really didn't come from a mixing background and just migrated over there really quickly, but most come as mix engineers who were not happy with the way their systems were sounding, and then learned how to do that. And that was definitely my story. I was not happy with the results I was getting out of my current system deployments. I felt confused. I didn't know. And so I wanted to learn this craft. So I think There's not always this hard discrepancy between A1 behind the desk and system engineer responsible for the system. In the vast majority of shows, especially these pop-up ones, bar gigs, whatever, there is not this delineation, but knowing that you are responsible for both can help you know what type of mindset to have when you're setting up the system and then when you're mixing up the show. Because when you're running sound check, you don't want to have to be worrying about your delay speakers or your front fills or whatever because you can't hear them. You're at front of house. You just want to worry about your mix. So subdividing that labor and responsibility of what hat am I wearing right now, I think is really helpful, even if you are doing both jobs. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to mix. I had a blast, and I think it's a good thing for anyone to do, even if they are a regular system engineer. Okay, so to recap, I enjoyed with the flip being able to give my full attention to the mix, audio playback cues, and the live stream. Second, I really end up not caring about the PA near as much as I thought it would because it was so transparent. The tool got out of my way so I could simply do my job. And then lastly, I still love mixing shows and never want to get away from that. Thank you so much for listening today. My name is Michael Curtis. I'll catch you next time.